It was 9:15 a.m. on a Friday, the last day before half-term break. Inside Pantglas Junior School, 116 children had just finished singing All Things Bright and Beautiful. They didn't know that 140,000 yards of black slurry were currently hurtling down the mountain at 30 miles per hour. If you believe these stories need to be remembered so history doesn't repeat itself, please hit the like button. It helps this documentary reach more people. In the heart of South Wales, nestled in a valley carved by the River Taff, lay the village of Aberfan. It was a community built on coal, living quite literally in the shadow of the industry that sustained it. Animated maps show the town's close proximity to the Merthyr Vale colliery, a constant looming presence. Towering over the village were 7 colossal spoil tips, mountains of mining waste, piled high over decades. Tip number 7 was the most menacing, a quarter-mile long and perched precariously above the Pantglas Junior School. It was a black mountain, silently growing day by day. Locals, including a worried borough engineer, saw the danger. They pointed to the springs bubbling beneath the tip and sent letters of complaint, their pleas echoing a growing sense of dread. But their warnings fell on deaf ears. In tense meetings, officials from the National Coal Board dismissed these concerns. They used the town's economic dependence as a weapon, implying that pushing the issue would risk jobs and the colliery's future. It was a form of blackmail that silenced dissent and sealed the village's fate. The rain had been falling for days, a relentless downpour soaking the massive spoiled tip perched precariously above the village. But deep within the mountain, hidden from sight, a natural spring was secretly turning the coal waste into a volatile, unstable mass. This was a critical fact the National Coal Board had known about and concealed, a ticking time bomb waiting for the perfect trigger. At 9:15 a.m. on the morning of October 21, 1966, that trigger was pulled. The saturated heart of the tip gave way. A dark, glistening wave of over 150,000 tons of slurry broke free from the mountainside. Witnesses would later describe the sound not as a rumble, but as a terrifying roar, like a low-flying jet screaming through the valley. It moved with horrifying speed, a tsunami of black sludge hurtling directly towards the unsuspecting village below. In its path lay homes, farms, and the Pantglas Junior School, where lessons for the day had just begun. The impact was instantaneous and catastrophic. The wave, standing 30 feet high, slammed into the school, engulfing it in a torrent of thick black sludge. Walls collapsed, and classrooms were instantly filled with the suffocating waste, burying everything and everyone inside. The deafening roar of the slide was replaced by an abrupt, shocking silence that fell over the valley, a stillness more terrifying than the noise that had preceded it. The scene was one of unimaginable devastation, a landscape remade in black slurry. From the nearby colliery, miners, many just finishing their night shift, saw the disaster unfold. Without a moment's hesitation, they ran towards the school. They descended upon the buried building, a desperate army of fathers and neighbors. With their bare hands, with shovels, buckets, and anything they could find, they began to dig. They tore at the sludge, a frantic, heartbreaking race against time, hoping to reach the children trapped beneath. The world watched as a nation mourned. But for the bereaved of Aberfan, the fight for justice had only just begun. The question of how such a preventable tragedy could occur demanded answers, leading to a tribunal that would expose a rot at the very heart of the system, meant to protect its workers and communities. A solemn courtroom fell silent as Lord Justice Edmund Davies took his seat, presiding over what would become a grueling 76-day inquiry. Witnesses were called, experts testified, and a horrifying picture began to emerge. The National Coal Board, the very institution responsible for the colliery, had known about the dangers of the spoil tips for years. Reports had been filed, warnings issued, but all were ignored. The tribunal methodically dismantled the NCB's web of excuses, revealing a culture of indifference that placed profit above human life. In the face of mounting evidence, the NCB chairman, Lord Robbins, appeared before the cameras. He offered a hollow performance of contrition while shamelessly suggesting the disaster was unforeseeable, a tragic act of God. But the tribunal's findings cut through the deception. Their final report was a damning indictment, describing a terrifying tale of bungling ineptitude by many men who had failed in their duty. These words, stark and unforgiving, were a vindication for the community, but they offered little comfort for the immeasurable loss they had endured. The final insult came not in a courtroom, but in a ledger. The NCB, the multi-million-pound state-run corporation found responsible for the deaths of 116 children and 28 adults, refused to foot the entire bill for making the remaining tips safe. The disaster led directly to the Mines and Quarries Tips Act 1969 and eventually the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. Half of the survivors suffered from lifelong PTSD. The people of Aberfan fought for decades for the truth. Share this video to ensure their story isn't forgotten. Subscribe and turn on notifications for our next historical investigation. Aberfan wasn't a natural disaster. It was a failure of humanity. A reminder that when profit is put before people, the cost is often measured in lives.